I pulled into the gravel driveway of my beloved lakefront cottage in Michigan for my annual summer writing retreat, only to find strangers unloading furniture and a bright yellow "sold" sign stabbed into the front yard like a knife through my heart. My hands shook as I dialed my parents, and when Mom answered, she casually mentioned they sold the cabin to pay for my younger sister Brielle's extravagant wedding. "Thanks for the wedding present, sis." Brielle's voice rang out mockingly in the background. My world crumbled instantly as I realized my childhood sanctuary, my creative haven, my promised inheritance from Grandma Rose had been stolen from under me without consultation. The new owners, a pleasant retired couple from Grand Rapids, showed me the legitimate purchase documents while I stood there in complete shock. Everything appeared legal and binding. My name appeared nowhere on the paperwork despite decades of promises that this cottage would someday be mine. The husband, a former insurance adjuster, kindly explained they'd bought the property 3 weeks ago through a quick cash sale. I drove straight to my parents' suburban Denver home, my mind reeling with disbelief. The 6-hour journey felt like a nightmare, where reality kept shifting beneath my feet. When I burst through their front door, Mom was arranging wedding invitation samples on the dining room table, while Dad watched television in his recliner. "How could you sell Grandma Rose's cottage without telling me?" I demanded, my voice cracking with emotion. Dad barely looked up from his sports program. "Gladys, calm down. Family comes first, and weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events. Brielle deserves the perfect day." Mom continued sorting invitations as if I hadn't spoken. "You never used that place anyway, living all the way out in Portland. It was just sitting empty most of the year, collecting dust and property taxes." "But you promised me that cottage since I was 12 years old. Grandma Rose wanted me to have it. She said it would inspire my writing, help me become the author she always knew I could be." "Your grandmother is gone, sweetheart," Mom replied with infuriating calmness. "And dreams don't pay for weddings. Brielle needs this money for her future happiness." I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of my writing space in the cottage's sunroom, my favorite reading nook by the stone fireplace, the dock where I'd spent countless hours crafting stories. This place isn't just property to me. It's my creative sanctuary, my connection to Grandma Rose, my entire writing career. Dad finally turned around, his expression hardening. "Your writing career, Gladys. You're 28 years old and still freelancing for magazines. When are you going to get serious about life instead of chasing fairy tales?" The words hit me like physical blows. "I make a living with my writing. I've published 3 novels and dozens of articles. This cottage is where I do my best work." "Well, now you'll have to find somewhere else," Mom said, sealing an invitation with deliberate precision. "Brielle's wedding is in 6 weeks and the vendor deposits are non-refundable." That's when I discovered the most shocking detail. While examining the sale documents the new owners had shown me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My signature appeared on several pages as a co-signer authorizing the sale and transfer of funds. But I had never signed anything. I had never even seen these documents before today. "Mom, Dad, look at this." I spread the papers across their coffee table. "This is my signature on these legal forms, but I never signed them. How is my name on these documents?" They exchanged nervous glances that told me everything I needed to know. My own parents had forged my signature to make me an unwilling accomplice in stealing my inheritance. Before my parents could explain their forgery, the front door burst open, and my sister Brielle swept in like a tornado of self-importance. She wore a massive engagement ring that caught the light from every angle, clearly worth more than my entire annual income. Her designer handbag probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Oh, good you're here," she exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. "I wanted to personally thank you for your generous wedding gift. The cottage sale money is going to make my dream wedding absolutely perfect." I stared at her in disbelief. "Brielle, this isn't a gift. This is theft. That cottage was supposed to be my inheritance." She laughed a cold sound that made my skin crawl. "Inheritance, Gladys. You're not even successful enough to afford your own house. What would you do with lake property? At least now it's contributing to something meaningful." Something meaningful, it's a wedding, not a cure for cancer. My wedding is going to be featured in 3 different bridal magazines. She continued ignoring my pain entirely. 200 guests at a vineyard in Napa Valley. The dress alone cost $15,000, custom designed by the same artist who made gowns for Broadway stars. Our celebrity wedding planner is flying in from New York, and we're having imported flowers from 3 different countries. I felt sick listening to her casual mention of these astronomical expenses. Brielle, that money came from selling my grandmother's cottage. Don't you feel any guilt about that? Guilt. She examined her manicured nails dismissively. Why should I feel guilty for finally getting what I deserve? You've been playing pretend author for years, living in Fantasyland, while I built a real career in marketing. Maybe now you'll stop hiding in the woods and get a real job. I am a real author. I've published books, I have readers, I make a living from my writing. Living, you mean barely surviving. When's the last time you bought anything nice for yourself? When's the last time you went on a real vacation instead of hiding away in that musty old cabin? Her words stung because they contained just enough truth to hurt. My writing income was modest, and I did live simply. But I had chosen that life deliberately prioritizing creativity and meaningful work over material wealth. The cottage wasn't musty, I said quietly. It was beautiful and peaceful and full of memories. Well, now it's full of someone else's memories, Brielle replied with a cruel smile. And speaking of memories, you'll love this final touch to my perfect wedding celebration. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo that made my heart stop. Marcus, my ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago, stood beside Brielle with his arm around her waist. They were both smiling at the camera like they'd just shared some private joke. Marcus is my maid of honor's date, she announced triumphantly. Isn't that delicious? Sarah thought it would be fun to bring him as her +1, and when I told her about our family history, she insisted. He's so excited to see you again at the wedding. The room started spinning around me. Not only had my family stolen my inheritance and forged my signature, but my sister had orchestrated the ultimate humiliation by bringing my ex-boyfriend to witness my public defeat. Marcus had broken up with me, claiming he needed someone more ambitious and practical in his life. Now he'd get to watch Brielle's lavish wedding, funded by my stolen cottage, while I stood there with nothing. You planned this, I whispered. You specifically chose him to hurt me. Oh, Gladys, don't be so dramatic. The world doesn't revolve around your feelings. Marcus and I ran into each other at a networking event 6 months ago, and we've been hanging out ever since. He's actually been incredibly supportive during my wedding planning. He keeps saying how refreshing it is to be around someone who knows what she wants in life. The knife twisted deeper with every word. My sister had been secretly dating my ex-boyfriend while manipulating our parents into selling my cottage. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated campaign to destroy everything I held dear. The next morning, I drove back to Portland in a fog of rage and heartbreak. My first stop was the law office of Sarah Fleming, an attorney who specialized in property disputes and family law. Her downtown office overlooked the Willamette River, and the view should have been calming, but I felt nothing except determination to fight for justice. Fleming examined the forged documents with a magnifying glass and professional scrutiny. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation handling complex fraud cases. After 20 minutes of careful analysis, she looked up with concern, etched across her features. This signature forgery is extremely sophisticated, she said, pointing to subtle pen pressure variations that matched my natural writing style. Whoever did this had access to multiple samples of your genuine signature and possibly professional training in document manipulation. Could it have been my parents? They've seen me sign birthday cards and checks over the years. Unlikely. This level of skill suggests either a professional forger or someone with extensive experience in document fraud. The pressure variations, the pen angle, even the slight tremor that appears in your natural signature when you're concentrating, all of these details have been perfectly replicated. My stomach dropped. So what can I do? Can we reverse the sale? Fleming set down her magnifying glass and folded her hands. Criminal fraud has definitely occurred here. We could file charges and potentially recover the property, but civil litigation could take 2 to 3 years and cost more than the cottage's current market value. Property law heavily favors completed sales, especially when the buyers acted in good faith. I felt my last hope crumbling, so they just get away with it. Not necessarily. Something about this entire transaction bothers me professionally. She pulled up county records on her computer screen. The sale price was $240,000 for lakefront property in that area, but similar properties sold for between $270,000 and $300,000 in the same time period. So they sold it for less than market value, significantly less, which raises questions about why the buyers got such a favorable deal and why your parents accepted such a low offer when they supposedly needed maximum funds for the wedding. Fleming typed rapidly, accessing multiple databases. The purchasing entity is listed as Great Lakes Investment Holdings, which appears to be a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The actual buyers you met were likely hired representatives, not the true owners. What does that mean? It means this wasn't a simple family property sale. Someone with sophisticated financial knowledge orchestrated this transaction, possibly for purposes beyond just helping your sister fund her wedding. Shell corporations are typically used to hide asset ownership for tax avoidance or money laundering purposes. She printed out several pages of corporate filing information. I'm also seeing connections between Great Lakes Investment Holdings and several other shell companies that have been involved in similar below-market property purchases across Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. You think there's a larger criminal operation. I think your family may have been targeted by people who specialize in manipulating families into undervalued property sales. The sophisticated forgery, the shell corporation, the below-market price, these aren't typical elements of family disputes over inheritance. Fleming reached for her phone. I want to contact a colleague who works with federal financial crimes. If there's an organized scheme targeting families like yours, this becomes a much bigger case than simple sibling rivalry over a cottage. As she dialed, I realized that my family's betrayal might be just one small piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. Someone had been pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating all of us for purposes I couldn't yet understand. Fleming's colleague referred me to Detective Ray Morrison, a white-collar crime specialist who had been tracking suspicious property sales across the Great Lakes region for 18 months. Morrison, a former FBI agent with silver hair and intense blue eyes, met me at a coffee shop near Portland State University the following afternoon. Your family's financial advisor, Morrison, began without preamble. Robert Whitman. Tell me everything you know about him. I was surprised by his immediate focus on someone I'd barely considered. He's handled my parents' investments and retirement planning for about 5 years. They trust him completely. Why? Morrison opened a thick file folder. Because Robert Whitman appears in 7 other cases we're investigating involving families who sold valuable property at below-market prices to shell corporations. In every case, Whitman convinced the families they were making smart financial decisions. He showed me photographs of Whitman from various business events. The man looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a trustworthy financial advisor, conservative suit. Friendly smile, expensive watch, the kind of person your parents would instinctively trust with their life savings. I need you to help me understand how Whitman operates, Morrison continued. We suspect he identifies families with valuable assets, gains their confidence, then manipulates them into transactions that benefit his criminal partners. But we need evidence of his direct involvement. How would I get that evidence? By pretending to be a potential client. You're young, presumably have some assets from your writing career, maybe inheritance prospects, the kind of person he'd want to recruit. Morrison's plan was risky, but straightforward. I would contact Whitman's office claiming to need investment advice after receiving a book advance. I would wear a wire and try to get him to reveal his true methods for helping families maximize their property values. 3 days later, I sat in Whitman's luxurious downtown Denver office, which occupied the top floor of a glass tower with panoramic mountain views. His desk was solid mahogany, his leather chairs probably cost more than my car, and original oil paintings lined the walls. Everything screamed success and reliability. "Miss Baker, I'm so pleased you contacted me," Whitman said, pouring expensive coffee from a silver service. "Your parents speak of you often, and I understand congratulations are in order for your sister's upcoming nuptials." "Thank you. Actually, that's partly why I'm here. My parents mentioned how helpful you were in structuring their contribution to Brielle's wedding expenses." His smile widened. "Ah, yes, a beautiful example of family assets working together for everyone's benefit. Your parents had capital tied up in that little cottage that wasn't generating any income. By liquidating it strategically, we freed up funds for immediate family needs while providing tax advantages." I felt sick hearing him describe the theft of my inheritance as strategic liquidation, but I forced myself to stay in character. "That's exactly the kind of creative thinking I need. I just received a substantial book advance and I want to make sure I'm maximizing every opportunity." Whitman leaned forward with predatory interest. "How substantial, if you don't mind me asking?" $60,000 up front with potential for much more if the book performs well." "Excellent. And do you own any property? Real estate can be a wonderful tool for the right kind of family financial planning." "I'm renting currently, but my grandmother left me some antique jewelry that might be worth quite a bit. And there's always the possibility of future family inheritances." "Perfect. You know, Miss Baker, the key to wealth building isn't just saving money, it's making your assets work efficiently within the broader family financial ecosystem. Sometimes that means liquidating sentimental assets to create opportunities for greater growth." As he spoke, Whitman pulled up files on his computer screen, apparently showing me examples of successful client strategies. But from my angle, I could see documents that made my blood run cold. Spreadsheets listed dozens of client names with property values, family relationship details, and notes about conversion timelines and resistance factors. "Mr. Whitman, how do you typically convince families to sell properties they're emotionally attached to?" He chuckled. "Emotion is the enemy of financial success, Miss Baker. I help families understand that sentimental attachment to assets is ultimately selfish. When your parents sold that cottage, they weren't just funding a wedding, they were investing in your sister's future happiness. Sometimes we have to help people see past their emotional blind spots to what's truly best for the family. And if some family members resist, well, legal ownership is what matters, not emotional attachment. Parents have the right to make decisions about their assets, especially when adult children aren't contributing financially to family needs. In your parents' case, the cottage was generating expenses but no income. Now that money is creating joy and memories that will last a lifetime." I wanted to vomit listening to his casual justification for destroying my dreams, but I pressed on. "The process must require a lot of legal paperwork." "Oh yes, but I have excellent relationships with attorneys and document specialists who handle all the technical details. My clients never have to worry about complicated signatures or filings. We take care of everything behind the scenes." There it was, his admission to having document specialists who could handle complicated signatures. Morrison had been right. Whitman was running a sophisticated operation that targeted families with valuable assets, manipulated them into undervalued sales, and used professional forgers to handle any paperwork obstacles. But as our conversation continued, I discovered something even more horrifying. Whitman's computer screen displayed what appeared to be my parents' actual investment portfolio, and the numbers made no sense. According to his records, they should have had over $400,000 in retirement savings, but the account balances showed less than $50,000. My parents weren't just being manipulated into selling my cottage. They were being systematically robbed of their entire life savings. Armed with screenshots I'd secretly taken during my meeting with Whitman, I drove straight back to my parents' house that evening. My hands trembled as I spread the printed evidence across their kitchen table, showing them bank statements and investment records that revealed the devastating truth about their financial situation. "Mom, Dad, sit down. We need to talk about your retirement accounts." Dad looked annoyed by my serious tone. "Gladys, we've already been through this cottage business. The decision is final. This isn't about the cottage anymore. It's about the $350,000 that's missing from your retirement savings." The color drained from Mom's face. "What are you talking about?" "Our accounts are doing fine. Robert shows us the statements every quarter." I pointed to the real account balances I'd photographed. "These are your actual current balances, not the fake statements Whitman has been giving you. Look at the dates. Look at the account numbers. Dad, your pension rollover that should have $400,000, it has $43,000 left." Dad snatched the papers with shaking hands. "That's impossible. We just reviewed our portfolio last month. Robert explained how our conservative investments were protecting us from market volatility." "Robert has been stealing from you for at least 3 years," I said gently. "These investment products he sold you don't exist. The monthly statements you've been receiving are completely fabricated. He's been transferring your money to offshore accounts while keeping you happy with fake paperwork." Mom started crying quietly. "But he's been so helpful, so trustworthy. He helped us with tax planning, insurance reviews, estate planning. He even recommended our attorney for the cottage sale." "Which attorney was that?" "David Thornton. Robert said he specialized in family property transfers and would make sure everything was handled properly." I felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. "Mom, I need you to call Thornton's office right now and ask to speak with him directly." She dialed with trembling fingers. After a few minutes of conversation, her face went completely white. "The receptionist says no one named David Thornton has ever worked at that firm. The man we met with was using someone else's office space for the afternoon." Dad slumped in his chair like he'd been physically beaten. "So the cottage sale are retirement savings. Everything. Everything. Whitman and his partners have been systematically draining your accounts while convincing you to liquidate your remaining assets. The cottage money is already gone, transferred through the same offshore networks they've been using for your retirement funds." Mom looked up at me with desperate hope. "Can we get any of it back?" "I don't know yet. But there's something else you need to understand about Brielle's involvement in all this." I pulled out my phone and showed them text message screenshots that Detective Morrison had obtained through his investigation. Messages between Brielle and someone named Victoria Sterling, her wedding planner, discussing family asset liquidation and timeline coordination. "Brielle knew about your financial situation," I said quietly. "These messages show she's been working with the wedding planner to pressure you into selling the cottage even after learning that your retirement savings were depleted." Dad read the messages aloud with growing horror. Brielle to Victoria. "Parents are worried about money but won't admit cottage sale necessity. Need pressure strategy." Victoria to Brielle. "Standard family dynamics. Emphasize once-in-lifetime opportunity and guilt about daughter's happiness. Works every time." "There's more," I continued. "Victoria Sterling isn't just a wedding planner. She's married to Robert Whitman. They've been running coordinated scams targeting wealthy families through wedding planning and financial advising for years." Mom stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at their carefully maintained garden. "Our own daughter knew we were being robbed and demanded we give her money anyway." "The wedding expenses aren't even real," I added. "Most of the vendor contracts contain phantom charges and kickback schemes. Brielle is paying inflated prices while Sterling and Whitman pocket the difference. She's being scammed while helping them scam you." Dad looked older than I'd ever seen him. "How many other families?" Detective Morrison says they've identified at least 30 similar cases across 5 states. Elderly couples, recent retirees, families with valuable property, and adult children, they want to help. The pattern is always the same: gain trust, manufacture, financial pressure, manipulate family dynamics, steal everything. "What about the wedding? Should we tell Brielle what we've discovered?" I hesitated. Morrison had specifically warned me not to alert any potential suspects until the investigation was complete. But these were my parents, and they deserved to know the truth about their daughter's betrayal. Detective Morrison wants us to wait before confronting Brielle or Whitman. If they realize we're onto them, they might flee the country with whatever money they haven't stolen yet. But there's something else you should know. I showed them the final piece of evidence Morrison had shared with me, financial records, showing that Brielle had been receiving direct payments from Sterling's company for the past 8 months, listed as family coordination consultant fees. She's been getting paid to help them target you, I said. This wasn't just selfishness or wedding stress. Brielle has been actively participating in a criminal conspiracy to steal your life savings. Dad put his head in his hands. 63 years old, and we have to start over from nothing because we trusted the wrong people, including our own daughter. We're not giving up, I said firmly. Morrison thinks we can recover at least some of the money if we help them build a case. But we have to be smart about it. We have to pretend everything is normal until they're ready to make arrests. Mom turned back from the window, her tears replaced by steel determination. What do you need us to do? Over the next week, I transformed myself into an undercover investigator using skills I'd developed as a journalist to infiltrate Brielle's wedding vendor network. I created a fake identity as Amanda Richardson, a recently engaged marketing executive planning her own Napa Valley wedding for the following spring. My first target was Victoria Sterling herself. Her office in downtown San Francisco occupied an entire floor of a converted Victorian mansion, decorated with enough flowers and crystal to supply a small hotel. Sterling was exactly what I expected: perfectly coiffed designer, everything, the kind of woman who charged $20,000 just for the privilege of her attention. "Amanda, darling, I'm so excited to discuss your vision," Sterling gushed as she led me into her consultation room. Napa Valley weddings are my absolute specialty. I've coordinated celebrations for tech executives, entertainment industry leaders, even European royalty. I played my role perfectly, describing an imaginary fiancé and a family eager to spare no expense for their daughter's perfect day. Sterling's eyes lit up with dollar signs as I mentioned my inheritance from grandmother and parents who own several investment properties. "Now, for a wedding of the caliber you're describing, my standard package begins at $150,000, she said casually. "But for clients with your vision and resources, I typically recommend our Platinum experience, which starts around $250,000. "That sounds perfect. Can you show me examples of recent Platinum weddings?" Sterling pulled out a leather portfolio containing photographs of elaborate celebrations. I recognized several venues, floral arrangements, and decorative elements from Brielle's wedding planning photos. Sterling was literally showing me my sister's wedding as an example of her work. This particular celebration is happening in just 3 weeks. Sterling explained, pointing to pictures I'd seen Brielle post on social media. The bride's family has been wonderful to work with, very understanding of the investment required for excellence. Her parents even liquidated some real estate to ensure she could have everything she dreamed of. "How did you convince them to sell property that seems like a big step?" Sterling's smile became predatory. "Oh, that's where my husband's expertise comes in. Robert handles the financial consulting side of our business. He helps families understand how to optimize their assets for once-in-a-lifetime celebrations. Most people don't realize how much dead money they have sitting in unproductive properties. Your husband is a financial advisor, the best in the business. Robert specializes in helping families liquidate underperforming assets and convert them into meaningful experiences. He's worked with dozens of families to fund dream weddings, anniversary celebrations, milestone birthdays. It's really beautiful how he helps people prioritize what truly matters." I felt nauseated listening to her describe the systematic destruction of families' financial security as beautiful. But I pressed on. "Does he work with all your clients?" "Only the special ones who need comprehensive financial planning. Robert has a gift for helping families see past emotional attachments to property and focus on creating memories. Sometimes adult children get upset about inheritance issues, but parents have every right to use their assets for their children's happiness. Sterling pulled out contracts and vendor agreements for my wedding, and I was shocked by the obvious fraud embedded in every document. Catering costs were inflated by 40% above market rates. Floral arrangements were priced at 3 times what similar vendors charged. Even basic services like photography and transportation carried mysterious coordination fees and premium service charges that doubled the actual costs. These vendor prices seem quite high, I mentioned carefully. Amanda, you're paying for the Sterling experience. My vendors are all exclusive partners who understand my standards for excellence. They may charge more than average providers, but the quality and service are incomparable. Besides, my vendor relationships include special rebate programs that help offset my consulting fees. There was the admission I needed. Sterling was taking kickbacks from inflated vendor charges, essentially getting paid twice for every service, while her clients paid premium prices for standard products. But the most damning evidence came when Sterling's assistant brought in a folder marked Richardson Wedding that clearly contained documents for multiple events. I glimpsed financial worksheets listing other client names, family asset values, and notes about liquidation timelines and resistance management strategies. I see you work with many families, I observed. Oh yes, we've perfected a system that works beautifully for everyone involved. Robert identifies families with the right financial profile. I create the perfect celebration vision, and our vendor network ensures everything exceeds expectations. It's taken years to develop these relationships, but now we can guarantee results. As our meeting concluded, Sterling handed me a business card with both her information and Robert Whitman's contact details. I always recommend that serious clients meet with Robert first to discuss financial optimization. He'll help you understand exactly how to fund your dream wedding while maximizing your family's overall financial health. I left Sterling's office with recorded evidence of price inflation kickback schemes and coordinated criminal activity, but I also realized that Brielle wasn't just a victim of this conspiracy. She was an active participant who knew exactly how her wedding was being funded and at what cost to our family. Detective Morrison's investigation had expanded into a full FBI operation by the time I delivered the recordings from my meeting with Victoria Sterling. Agent Maria Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed federal investigator specializing in financial crimes, met me at a secure office building in downtown Portland to review the evidence we'd gathered. Your sister's wedding is the centerpiece of a criminal enterprise that's been operating across 6 states for almost 4 years. Rodriguez explained, spreading FBI surveillance photos across the conference table. Sterling and Whitman have victimized at least 43 families that we've identified so far, stealing an estimated $12 million through coordinated wedding planning and financial advisory schemes. The photos showed the couple at various luxury events, business conferences, and high-end social gatherings where they identified potential targets. They looked like any successful professional couple, which made their crimes even more sinister. How do they choose their victims? Wealthy families with adult children approaching marriage age, recent retirees with substantial assets, anyone with valuable property and family dynamics they can manipulate. Sterling cultivates relationships in affluent social circles, while Whitman positions himself as a trusted financial expert. They're patient, sometimes spending years building trust before striking. Rodriguez showed me organizational charts mapping the criminal network. They work with a team of specialists, document forgers, shell corporation managers, offshore banking facilitators, even private investigators who research target families' financial situations and personal relationships. And they specifically target family conflict. It's their specialty. Sterling creates artificial time pressure with wedding deadlines and social expectations, while Whitman manufactures financial crises that force rapid asset liquidation. They're experts at turning family love into financial vulnerability. The most disturbing revelation came when Rodriguez showed me evidence that this organization had been monitoring my family for over 18 months before making their move. Private investigators had compiled detailed reports on our financial situations, personal relationships, career struggles, and emotional dynamics. They knew about your relationship with the cottage, your writing career challenges, even your breakup with Marcus, Rodriguez said. This entire operation was designed specifically around your family's psychology and vulnerabilities. So Marcus is involved too. Rodriguez smiled for the first time. Actually, that's where this story gets interesting. Marcus Taylor isn't just your ex-boyfriend who happened to reconnect with your sister. He's FBI agent Marcus Taylor, and he's been undercover investigating this organization for the past 8 months. I felt the world tilt around me. Marcus is FBI, one of our best financial crime specialists. When we identified your sister as a person of interest in this case, we needed someone who could get close to her social circle. Agent Taylor volunteered when he learned your family was involved. He volunteered because of me. Agent Taylor disclosed his previous relationship with you and requested assignment to this case. He felt responsible for not recognizing the signs when your family became targets. His cover story about reconnecting with Brielle at a networking event was designed to position him as the perfect witness to their criminal activities. Rodriguez pulled out surveillance transcripts of conversations between Marcus and Brielle. Your sister has been remarkably open about her role in the conspiracy. She genuinely believes she's entitled to your family's assets and has no guilt about the methods used to obtain them. The transcripts made for horrifying reading. Brielle bragged to Marcus about manipulating our parents' emotions, dismissed my attachment to the cottage as pathetic, and expressed excitement about using the stolen money to fund a luxury honeymoon in Europe. She even joked about my potential reaction when I discovered the cottage sale. Agent Taylor has been building evidence while maintaining his cover, but we need more direct proof of the financial crimes. That's where you come in. Rodriguez outlined their plan. The FBI had been tracking Sterling and Whitman's operation for months, but they needed recorded evidence of active fraud to make arrests that would stick. I would attend Brielle's wedding wearing sophisticated surveillance equipment positioned to witness and record the criminal conspiracy's final phase. We believe they're planning to disappear after the wedding with the remaining stolen assets, Rodriguez explained. Your sister's elaborate celebration is essentially their retirement party funded by money stolen from dozens of families, including your own. What about the other victims? We've been working with families across multiple states to document their losses and prepare for asset recovery. If we can arrest Sterling and Whitman at the wedding, we can freeze their offshore accounts and potentially return millions of dollars to the people they've robbed. The plan was risky but straightforward. I would attend the wedding as expected, maintain normal family relationships, and use hidden recording devices to capture evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Marcus would continue his undercover role while coordinating with FBI agents positioned throughout the wedding venue. There's one more thing you should know, Rodriguez said as our meeting concluded. Your sister has already applied for a second passport under an assumed identity. She's planning to flee the country immediately after the wedding ceremony, leaving Marcus and your parents to face potential criminal charges while she starts a new life with the stolen money. I realized that Brielle's betrayal went even deeper than I'd imagined. She wasn't just stealing my inheritance. She was prepared to destroy our entire family to cover her escape from justice. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus contacted me directly for the first time since our breakup 3 years ago. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Portland's Hawthorne district, a place we'd frequented during our relationship. Seeing him again brought back a flood of memories, both painful and sweet. Gladys, I owe you an explanation and an apology. He began looking genuinely distressed. I know this situation must be incredibly confusing and hurtful for you. He looked older than I remembered, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and difficult work. But his fundamental kindness remained unchanged, the quality that had first attracted me to him years ago. Agent Rodriguez told me you're FBI. I said quietly. "She said you volunteered for this assignment because our family was targeted." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening with anger. "When I learned that Sterling and Whitman had selected your family as victims, I couldn't stand by and let them destroy people I cared about. I requested assignment to this case specifically to protect you and your parents. But our relationship ended badly. Why would you want to help me?" "Because our breakup was my mistake, not yours," he said firmly. "I was young and stupid and afraid of commitment. I convinced myself that you were too focused on your writing to build a real future together. I was wrong about everything that mattered." He explained how his FBI career had developed after our breakup, specializing in white-collar crimes that targeted families and elderly victims. When the Sterling Whitman investigation identified my family as potential targets, he recognized our names immediately. "I've spent 3 years regretting how I ended things between us," Marcus continued. "When I saw these criminals planning to destroy your family's financial security, I knew I had to do whatever it took to stop them. Even if it meant pretending to date my sister." Marcus looked physically ill. "That's been the worst part of this assignment. Brielle is everything I thought I wanted when I was too immature to appreciate what we had together. She's ambitious and materialistic and completely focused on external success. Spending time with her has made me realize how shallow and wrong my priorities were back then." He showed me transcripts of conversations where Brielle had mocked my writing career, dismissed my emotional attachment to the cottage, and bragged about manipulating our parents' love for her into financial gain. "She has no empathy for anyone else's feelings or needs," Marcus said. "Everything is about her image, her desires, her sense of entitlement. She genuinely believes that your family exists to serve her ambitions. And she has no idea you're FBI. None. She thinks I'm a marketing consultant who was impressed by her success and social connections. She's been remarkably open about her role in the criminal conspiracy because she genuinely doesn't see anything wrong with it." Marcus pulled out his phone and played audio recordings that made my stomach turn. Brielle casually discussing how to manipulate our parents into selling more assets, laughing about my pathetic reaction to losing the cottage, planning to use the wedding money for a European escape route if legal problems arose. "The hardest part is that she keeps talking about you," Marcus said quietly. "She's obsessed with proving that she's more successful and worthy of family support than you are. This entire criminal scheme seems motivated partly by sibling rivalry and partly by genuine greed. Do you think she understands the criminal implications?" "Absolutely. She's been receiving monthly payments from Sterling's company for over a year, officially listed as Family Coordination Consulting. She knows exactly where the money is coming from and how it's being obtained. She just doesn't care who gets hurt as long as she gets what she wants." Marcus reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "Gladys, I need you to know that working this case has been torture for me personally. Every day I've had to pretend to care about someone who represents everything I dislike, while knowing that I threw away a relationship with someone who represents everything I actually value." "Marcus, don't. We can't go backwards." "I'm not asking to go backwards. I'm asking for the chance to go forward differently. After this case is over, after we've stopped these criminals and recovered your family's money, would you be willing to consider whether we might have a future together?" I looked at this man who had broken my heart 3 years ago, who was now risking his career to protect my family from criminals who had spent months pretending to care about my sister while working to expose her crimes. The situation was impossibly complicated. "Let's focus on stopping the criminals first," I said. "Everything else can wait until after justice is served." Marcus nodded, understanding that I needed time to process everything I'd learned. But as we prepared for the final phase of the investigation, I realized that my feelings for him had never completely disappeared. They'd just been buried under hurt and disappointment. The wedding was in 2 days, and we were about to walk into the most dangerous situation any of us had ever faced. Working with Agent Rodriguez's investigation team, I spent the next 2 days contacting extended family members across 3 states to understand the full scope of Sterling and Whitman's criminal network. What I discovered was a systematic campaign of financial destruction that had been targeting our family tree for over 2 years. My first call was to Great Aunt Helen in Phoenix, my grandmother's younger sister, who had always been the family's financial anchor. At 84, she remained sharp and independent, living in a beautiful desert home that had been in our family for decades. "Gladys, dear, what a lovely surprise," she said warmly. "I was just thinking about you after that strange visit from Brielle last month." "Strange visit? I didn't know Brielle had been to see you." "Oh yes, she came with her wedding planner and some financial advisor fellow. Very concerned about my estate planning they were. Said the family was worried about my assets being properly distributed when I'm gone." My blood ran cold. "Aunt Helen, what kind of estate planning advice did they give you?" "Well, they suggested I update my will to make things easier for everyone. The financial man said my current arrangements were too complicated and might cause family fighting after I pass. He recommended simplifying everything by naming Brielle as primary executor and beneficiary, since she has business experience." "Did you sign anything?" "They had papers all prepared very official looking. Said it was just preliminary paperwork to get the process started. I signed a few documents, but I haven't heard anything since then." I felt sick. Sterling and Whitman had convinced my elderly aunt to sign documents that probably transferred significant assets to Brielle's control, using the same combination of false urgency and family manipulation they'd employed against my parents. "Aunt Helen, I need you to contact your attorney immediately and review any documents you signed. I think you may have been targeted by criminals." After explaining the situation, I helped Aunt Helen contact her lawyer, who confirmed that the documents she'd signed were fraudulent transfer papers that would have given Brielle control over Helen's entire estate upon her death. Fortunately, the attorney had refused to file them due to suspicious elements, but Helen had unknowingly signed away her financial independence. My next call was to Cousin James in Michigan, a 26-year-old graduate student who had been planning to start medical school the following fall. His voice sounded defeated when he answered the phone. "Gladys, I'm actually glad you called. I've been meaning to reach out to family about a financial situation that's gotten out of control." "What kind of situation?" "Remember my college fund that Grandpa Rose set up for me, about $60,000 that was supposed to cover medical school expenses? Well, Brielle contacted me 6 months ago saying she'd found an amazing investment opportunity that could double the money in time for school." James explained how Brielle had introduced him to Robert Whitman, who presented sophisticated investment documents promising guaranteed returns through family partnership opportunities. The medical school fund had been transferred to offshore accounts that James now couldn't access. "I tried calling Whitman's office last week because I need the money for school applications," James continued. "But the phone number is disconnected and the investment company doesn't seem to exist anymore. I think I've been scammed out of my entire education fund." "James, you were definitely scammed, but it's part of a larger criminal investigation. The FBI is working to recover stolen assets." My final call was to Uncle William in Colorado, Dad's younger brother who had served 20 years in the Air Force before retiring to run a small aviation business. William's situation was the most heartbreaking of all. "That investment advisor your sister recommended has been a godsend," William said cheerfully. "Robert helped me roll over my military pension into a high-yield program that's been generating fantastic returns. I'm finally going to have enough money to expand the business and maybe take that European trip Martha's always wanted." "Uncle William, when did you last see actual statements from these investments?" "Oh, Robert handles all that technical stuff. He sends me quarterly reports showing how much the accounts have grown. Just last month, I was up $47,000 from my original investment." I realized that William was still being actively defrauded, receiving fake statements, while his actual pension money disappeared into offshore accounts. Unlike my parents, he hadn't yet discovered the theft. "Uncle William, I need you to contact the military pension office immediately and request verification of your actual account balances. Don't tell anyone you're doing this, especially Robert Whitman. After spending hours on the phone with family members, I compiled a devastating picture of the criminal conspiracy's scope. Sterling and Whitman had systematically targeted every branch of our family tree that had significant assets, elderly relatives, with estate planning needs, young adults with education funds, retired veterans with pension accounts, anyone who could be manipulated through family connections and false trust. The total amount stolen from our extended family exceeded $400,000, representing decades of savings, military service benefits, educational funds, and estate planning designed to help the next generation succeed. But the most shocking discovery came when I found evidence that Brielle had been actively recruiting family members for the criminal scheme, receiving referral bonuses for each relative she delivered to Whitman's fraudulent investment programs. She hadn't just participated in stealing my inheritance, she had systematically betrayed every family member who trusted her. Agent Rodriguez confirmed that family-based recruitment was Sterling and Whitman's primary strategy. They identify one susceptible family member and use them to gain access to the entire network of relatives. Brielle has been their most successful recruit, responsible for delivering 7 different family victims over 18 months. The wedding wasn't just a celebration funded by stolen money, it was a victory party commemorating the financial destruction of our entire family. The day before the wedding, I drove to Napa Valley wearing sophisticated FBI surveillance equipment hidden beneath a carefully chosen sundress. The recording devices were so advanced, they picked up conversations from 30 feet away, and the tiny cameras captured high-definition video through what appeared to be decorative buttons on my clothing. The rehearsal dinner took place at Sterling Vineyards, an exclusive hilltop winery overlooking miles of pristine California countryside. The setting was breathtakingly beautiful, with sunset light filtering through ancient oak trees and expensive floral arrangements perfuming the evening air. It was exactly the kind of romantic venue that would make any bride feel like royalty. Seeing the extravagant display, knowing how it was funded, made me physically nauseated. Every candle, every flower, every bottle of premium wine represented money stolen from hardworking families who had trusted the wrong people. The beauty felt obscene. Brielle held court at the center of everything radiant in a designer rehearsal dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She moved through the evening like a movie star, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced grace. To any observer, she was simply a happy bride celebrating the beginning of her perfect life. But I watched her interactions with cold, analytical eyes, listening through my surveillance equipment to conversations that revealed the true nature of this celebration. When she thought no one important was listening, Brielle's mask slipped completely. The family sacrifice angle worked perfectly, she told her maid of honor, Sarah, during a quiet moment near the wine bar. Parents always respond to guilt about their children's happiness. Victoria coached me on exactly what emotional buttons to push. And your sister never suspected anything. Gladys is too naive to understand how the world really works. She actually believed that Cottage would just sit there waiting for her forever, like some kind of fairy tale inheritance. Reality is for people who fight for what they want. I moved closer, pretending to admire the floral centerpieces while my recording equipment captured every word. "What about after the wedding?" Sarah asked. "Won't there be family drama when people start asking questions about the money?" Brielle's laugh was cold and calculating. "By then, it won't matter. Marcus and I are flying to Switzerland for our honeymoon, and we have arrangements in place for extended European travel if any legal complications arise. Victoria and Robert have exit strategies, prepared for situations like this." 20 feet away, Marcus stood with a group of wedding guests playing his role as the devoted boyfriend, while probably hearing every word through his own surveillance equipment. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the effort it took to maintain his cover, while listening to my sister casually discuss fleeing the country with stolen money. As the evening progressed, I witnessed Sterling and Whitman moving through the gathering like sharks among minnows, identifying wealthy guests and laying groundwork for future criminal schemes. They worked with practiced efficiency, collecting business cards and personal information while presenting themselves as successful entrepreneurs who specialized in helping affluent families maximize their financial potential. The wedding planning business is really just market research, Sterling explained to a tech executive from San Francisco whose daughter was recently engaged. We learned so much about family dynamics and financial priorities during the planning process. Robert and I often continue working with families long after the celebration, helping them optimize their asset management strategies. The executive's wife looked intrigued. What kind of optimization strategies? Oh, many families have significant wealth tied up in unproductive assets, vacation properties, antique collections, traditional investment accounts that aren't generating adequate returns. Robert specializes in helping people liquidate underperforming holdings and convert them into high-yield opportunities. Whitman joined the conversation with his trademark-friendly smile. The key is understanding that emotional attachment to assets often prevents optimal financial decision-making. We help families move past sentimental barriers and focus on generating real wealth for important life events. I watched in horror as they began the same manipulation process they'd used on my family, identifying psychological vulnerabilities and planting seeds for future financial exploitation. These criminals viewed wealthy families the same way predators viewed prey, as resources to be harvested through careful planning and patient manipulation. But the most damning evidence came during a private conversation between Sterling and Whitman that I recorded while pretending to look for the restroom. They stepped onto a secluded balcony overlooking the vineyard, thinking they were completely alone. Tomorrow's ceremony marks the end of Phase 3. Sterling said, consulting notes on her phone. Asset liquidation complete, family resistance, neutralized, exit strategies activated. We should have approximately $2.7 million in clean transfers by Sunday. What about the extended family complications? Whitman asked. The aunt in Phoenix is starting to ask questions about the estate planning documents. Brielle assured me that won't be a problem. Family members who create difficulties can be managed through social pressure and legal intimidation. Her sister has already been effectively neutralized through the cottage situation. And if law enforcement becomes involved, Sterling's smile was chilling. We have contingency plans for every scenario. Brielle has agreed to testify that any family conflicts were purely emotional disputes over inheritance distribution. She's prepared to claim that her parents and sister were trying to manipulate her wedding planning for their own financial gain. I realized that my sister wasn't just planning to escape with stolen money, she was prepared to frame our parents and me as the actual criminals if her conspiracy was ever discovered. The recording equipment captured their discussion of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and document destruction protocols that would eliminate evidence of their crimes. They spoke casually about destroying families' financial security as if they were discussing weather or restaurant choices. As the rehearsal dinner concluded, I watched Brielle accept toasts and congratulations from guests who had no idea they were celebrating a criminal enterprise's greatest success. My parents sat at the head table looking proud and happy, despite their own financial ruin, still believing they had sacrificed for their daughter's legitimate happiness. Tomorrow would determine whether justice prevailed or whether Sterling Whitman and Brielle escaped to enjoy their stolen fortune while their victims faced poverty and betrayal. The morning of Brielle's wedding dawned crisp and clear, with California sunshine streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the bridal suite at Auberge du Soleil, one of Napa Valley's most exclusive resorts. The room buzzed with activity as hairstylists, makeup artists, and photographers prepared my sister for her moment of supposed triumph. Brielle sat in the center of it all like a queen holding court, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her wedding dress hung nearby $15,000 of custom-designed perfection that represented more money than many families spent on their entire celebrations. I knocked on the door at exactly 10:30 when I knew most of the wedding staff would be taking a scheduled break. Agent Rodriguez had timed this confrontation carefully, ensuring that our conversation would be private, while Marcus and other undercover agents maintained surveillance from adjacent rooms. Gladys' perfect timing. Brielle called out cheerfully as I entered. I was just thinking about how grateful I am that our family could come together for this incredible day. All the sacrifices have been so worth it. She gestured around the opulent suite as if she were displaying art in a gallery. Fresh orchids filled crystal vases, champagne chilled in silver buckets, and designer shoes worth thousands of dollars waited beside silk stockings and diamond jewelry. It is incredible. I agreed, closing the door behind me and activating the recording equipment hidden in my purse. All this luxury funded by stealing our family's money. Brielle's smile didn't waver for a second. Stealing Gladys, you're being dramatic again. Mom and Dad chose to prioritize my happiness over holding on to unnecessary property. That's what loving families do. What about Great Aunt Helen's estate papers, or James's medical school fund, or Uncle William's military pension? Did our loving family choose to steal all that money too? For the first time, Brielle's confidence flickered slightly, but she recovered quickly, her expression shifting to cold calculation. I don't know what conspiracy theories you've been developing, but you're embarrassing yourself. Today is my wedding day, and I won't let your jealousy ruin it. Jealousy, Brielle, I know everything. I know about Victoria Sterling and Robert Whitman. I know about the shell corporations and offshore accounts. I know about your payments for recruiting family members. I know about your fake passport and your plan to flee the country after the ceremony. Brielle stood up slowly, her silk robe flowing around her like a ceremonial cape. When she turned to face me, her mask had completely fallen away, revealing the cold, calculating person she'd always been beneath her charming exterior. You know what, Gladys, you're right. I did orchestrate this entire operation. I identified our family as perfect targets, connected them with the right criminal partners, and systematically extracted every penny I could from people who were too naive to protect themselves. Her admission was so casual, so devoid of guilt or remorse, that I felt physically sick, but I needed to keep her talking for the recording equipment. Why would you destroy your own family? Because they were holding me back, she replied matter-of-factly. Do you have any idea what it's like being part of a family where nobody has any ambition? Dad's been working the same middle management job for 20 years. Mom volunteers at the library and thinks that's a career. You hide in the woods writing stories that nobody reads. She moved to the window overlooking the vineyard, her voice gaining intensity. I was the only one with the vision to see what our family assets could become if they were properly utilized. That cottage was wasted on your romantic fantasies about being a writer. Uncle William's pension was sitting in conservative accounts, earning nothing. Great Aunt Helen's estate was going to be distributed to a dozen relatives who didn't need it. So you decided to steal everything for yourself. I decided to consolidate resources where they could do the most good. This wedding represents the culmination of careful planning and strategic thinking. I transformed scattered family assets into a celebration that will launch the next phase of my life. Brielle pulled out her phone and showed me bank account information that made my stomach drop. Offshore accounts containing millions of dollars, transfer records showing systematic theft from dozens of families across multiple states, investment portfolios built entirely from stolen money. Victoria and Robert taught me how the world really works, she continued. Successful people take what they want from people who are too weak to stop them. Everything you see here represents my graduation from victim to victor. What about Marcus? Do you even care about him, or is he just part of your escape plan? Brielle laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth. Marcus is a useful temporary partner who provides social cover for my activities. After the honeymoon, there will probably be some tragic accident that leaves me a wealthy widow. I've already taken out life insurance policies that will provide additional capital for my new life. The casual way she discussed murdering the man she was about to marry revealed depths of sociopathy that terrified me. But I had to keep the conversation going until the FBI was ready to move. And our parents. What happens to them when your crimes are discovered? Oh, that's the beautiful part of this plan, Brielle said with genuine enthusiasm. If any legal problems arise, Mom and Dad will take the blame. I have documentation proving they authorized all the property sales and investment transfers. They'll be the ones facing criminal charges, while I'm safely established in a non-extradition country. She showed me forged documents that would make our parents appear to be the masterminds behind the criminal conspiracy, complete with fake signatures and backdated agreements that painted them as greedy manipulators who exploited family relationships for financial gain. You're going to frame the people who love you most. I'm going to protect myself using whatever methods are necessary. Love is a luxury I can't afford when millions of dollars and my freedom are at stake. Brielle walked to her vanity and picked up a small leather case that I recognized as a passport holder. Inside was the false identity she'd created for her post-wedding escape. New name, new nationality, complete documentation for starting a criminal-free life with stolen money. By tomorrow night, Brielle Davidson will no longer exist, she said triumphantly, and neither will any evidence connecting me to the unfortunate financial difficulties that befell our trusting family members. What she didn't know was that Marcus had been recording our entire conversation through surveillance equipment hidden throughout the bridal suite. Every admission, every threat, every detail of her criminal plans was being captured by multiple federal agents who were preparing to end her criminal career permanently. The wedding ceremony began at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the resort's garden amphitheater, with 200 guests seated among carefully arranged white roses and cascading ribbons. A string quartet played softly while servers circulated with champagne and elegant hors d'oeuvres. Everything looked perfect for what should have been the happiest day of my sister's life. I sat in the third row with my parents who still believed they were witnessing their daughter's legitimate celebration, despite knowing about their financial ruin. Dad wore his best suit and proudest smile, while Mom dabbed happy tears with an embroidered handkerchief. They looked like any loving parents at their child's wedding. Marcus stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, playing his role as the devoted groom, while FBI agents positioned throughout the venue prepared for the coordinated arrest operation. To any observer, he appeared nervous and excited about marrying the woman he loved. Only I knew the truth about his real feelings and professional obligations. Brielle made her entrance to Pachelbel's Canon, walking down the petal-strewn aisle in her $15,000 gown, like a vision of bridal perfection. The dress fit her flawlessly. Her makeup was expertly applied, and her smile radiated joy and satisfaction. She looked exactly like what she'd always dreamed of becoming the center of attention at an impossibly elegant celebration. The officiant, a distinguished minister from San Francisco, began the ceremony with traditional words about love commitment and the sacred bond between husband and wife. His voice carried easily across the garden as guests listened with respectful attention to familiar vows and promises. Dearly beloved, we gather today to witness the union of Brielle and Marcus in holy matrimony. Marriage represents the highest form of human commitment, built on foundations of trust, honesty, and mutual respect. I felt sick listening to words about trust and honesty while watching my sister marry a federal agent who was about to arrest her for criminal conspiracy. But I also felt a growing sense of anticipation as I waited for justice to finally arrive. The ceremony proceeded normally through readings, musical selections, and personal vows that Brielle delivered with practiced emotion. She spoke about finding her soulmate, building a life together, and the family support that had made their love possible. Every word was a calculated lie delivered to an audience that included people she'd systematically robbed. Marcus has shown me what it means to be truly understood and appreciated, she said, looking directly at him with apparent devotion. He supports my dreams and ambitions without trying to hold me back or make me feel guilty for wanting success. Marcus responded with his own carefully scripted vows about commitment and partnership, playing his role perfectly while federal agents moved into position around the ceremony area. I noticed subtle movements as plainclothes officers took strategic positions among the catering staff and photographers. The moment of truth came when the officiant reached the traditional question about objections to the marriage. If any person present knows of any lawful impediment why these two should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever, hold your peace. Instead of the expected silence, Agent Rodriguez stepped forward from her position among the wedding photographers, displaying her federal credentials while speaking in a clear, authoritative voice. Federal Bureau of Investigation. This ceremony is terminated. Brielle Davidson and Robert Whitman, you're under arrest for federal charges including wire fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. The garden erupted in confused voices and shocked gasps as guests realized they were witnessing arrests rather than wedding vows. FBI agents seemed to materialize from everywhere, servers removing aprons to reveal badges, photographers setting down cameras to display handcuffs, even some wedding guests producing federal identification. Victoria Sterling tried to run toward the parking area, but was immediately apprehended by agents who had been monitoring her movements all day. Her designer shoes and elegant dress made flight impossible as she stumbled across the manicured grass while being read her rights. Whitman attempted a different escape strategy, grabbing a guest's cell phone and shouting about lawyers and false accusations. But federal marshals surrounded him before he could make any calls, efficiently securing him with handcuffs while confiscating potential evidence. Brielle's reaction was the most dramatic of all. She stood frozen at the altar in her wedding gown, staring at Marcus with growing comprehension and rage as he removed his tuxedo jacket to reveal an FBI badge and service weapon. "You're a federal agent," she said with deadly calm. "Everything between us has been a lie." "Everything between us has been evidence gathering," Marcus replied with professional detachment. "You're under arrest for multiple federal crimes, and anything you say can and will be used against you in court." "But we were getting married. We were going to start a new life together." "We were never going to start anything together. I've been investigating your criminal activities for 8 months, and this wedding was the culmination of a federal sting operation designed to catch you and your partners in the act of money laundering and fraud." Brielle looked around the garden at 200 wedding guests who were now witnesses to her humiliation and defeat. Her perfect ceremony had become a crime scene, her moment of triumph transformed into public disgrace. "Agent Rodriguez," Marcus said formally, "I have recorded admissions from the suspect regarding criminal conspiracy, planned murder, and intent to flee the jurisdiction. The evidence collected during this operation should be sufficient for prosecution." As federal agents led my sister away in handcuffs, her wedding dress trailing through the dirt, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that justice was finally being served, sadness that our family had been destroyed by greed and betrayal, and hope that maybe, somehow, we could rebuild from the ashes of this devastating experience. 200 wealthy wedding guests stood in stunned silence as the elaborate reception became a federal crime scene, with agents seizing evidence and interviewing potential witnesses to the largest family-based fraud conspiracy in California history. In the immediate aftermath of the arrests, the wedding venue transformed into a coordinated law enforcement operation. FBI agents secured the scene, while federal marshals transported Brielle Sterling and Whitman to separate detention facilities for processing and interrogation. The 200 wedding guests found themselves witnesses to federal crimes rather than participants in a celebration. Agent Rodriguez took charge of victim assistance, working with families who had unknowingly funded the elaborate ceremony through their stolen assets. My parents sat in shocked silence as she explained the scope of the criminal conspiracy and the federal government's commitment to asset recovery. "Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, your daughter, has been charged with 17 federal crimes, including wire fraud, money laundering conspiracy, and interstate transportation of stolen property," Rodriguez explained gently. "But I want you to understand that you were victims of this scheme, not accomplices. Dad's voice shook when he finally spoke. "How much of our retirement money can be recovered?" "We've already frozen over $4 million in offshore accounts connected to this organization. Asset recovery will take time, but our financial crimes unit expects to return 60 to 70% of stolen funds to victims within 18 months." The cottage sale could be reversed immediately since the Shell Corporation purchase had been fraudulent from the beginning. The new owners, a retired couple from Grand Rapids, had unknowingly bought stolen property and would receive full compensation from seized criminal assets. Within a week, I would have the keys to my grandmother's cottage again. But the emotional recovery would take much longer than the financial restoration. My parents struggled to understand how their daughter could systematically destroy her own family for money. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss, challenging everything they believed about love, family loyalty, and human nature. 63 years old, and we have to rebuild our entire understanding of our child, Mom said quietly as we drove back to their Denver home after giving statements to federal investigators. "How do you recover from discovering that your daughter is a sociopath who is willing to murder people for money?" Uncle William's situation provided hope for broader family healing. When agents recovered his military pension funds, he learned for the first time that he'd been systematically robbed for over a year. Instead of anger, he expressed gratitude that law enforcement had intervened before his losses became catastrophic. "That military training taught me to focus on mission completion rather than dwelling on past mistakes," he told me during a family phone call. "Our mission now is helping other families avoid these kinds of predators." Great Aunt Helen's response was characteristically pragmatic. At 84, she'd survived the Great Depression, World War II, and multiple family tragedies. Financial fraud was just another challenge to overcome with dignity and determination. "I'm disappointed in Brielle, but I'm proud of you for fighting back," she told me. "Your grandmother Rose would be happy to know that her cottage is coming home where it belongs." Cousin James faced the most difficult recovery since his medical school fund couldn't be replaced in time for the current application cycle. But the publicity surrounding the case attracted attention from scholarship foundations and medical schools impressed by his resilience in the face of family betrayal. "I'll start med school a year later than planned, but I'll start with a better understanding of how greed and manipulation can destroy families," he said. "Maybe that will make me a better doctor." The most complicated relationship to navigate was with Marcus. After the arrests, he remained in California for several weeks, testifying before federal grand juries and helping prosecutors build cases against the various criminal defendants. When he finally returned to Portland, he called to ask if we might talk about rebuilding some kind of relationship. "I understand if you never want to see me again," he said when we met at the same coffee shop where he'd revealed his true identity. "I used your family's tragedy to advance a federal investigation, and I deceived you about my motives and feelings. But you also saved us from financial ruin and prevented my sister from escaping justice. Without your investigation, she'd be living in Europe with stolen money, while our family faced poverty and criminal charges." Marcus looked older and more serious than the young man I dated years earlier. The undercover assignment had clearly been emotionally difficult, requiring him to suppress his natural empathy while building cases against people who destroyed families for profit. "Working this case taught me things about myself that I didn't want to face," he admitted. "When I broke up with you 3 years ago, I was chasing the same kind of superficial success that motivated your sister's crimes. I wanted someone ambitious and materialistic because I thought that would make me seem more successful. And now I understand that real success means building something meaningful with someone who shares your values. You were focused on your writing because you believed in creating something important. I was too immature to appreciate that kind of dedication." I studied his face, looking for signs of the man I'd once loved beneath the federal agent who'd spent months deceiving my family. The fundamental kindness was still there, along with a new depth of understanding about what actually mattered in life. "I need time to process everything that's happened. I said honestly. My family has been destroyed. My sister is facing decades in prison, and I'm trying to rebuild my life from pieces. I can't make decisions about relationships until I understand who I am after all this trauma. Marcus nodded with genuine understanding. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready if you're ever ready. And if you're not, I'll respect that decision and be grateful for the chance to help protect people I care about. 6 months after Brielle's arrest, I stood on the dock of my restored cottage, watching autumn sunlight dance across the lake surface while I processed the dramatic changes that had transformed my life. The cottage looked exactly as it had before, the sail-weathered cedar shingles, stone fireplace-screened porch overlooking the water. But everything felt different, because I was different. The federal asset recovery had been more successful than anyone expected. Prosecutors seized over $6 million from Sterling and Whitman's criminal enterprise, allowing complete restitution to 47 victim families across 6 states. My parents' retirement funds were fully restored with interest. Uncle William recovered his military pension with accumulated dividends, and James received his medical school money, plus additional compensation for emotional damages. But I chose to use my cottage and my recovered assets for something more meaningful than personal restoration. Working with victim advocacy groups and federal prosecutors, I established the Rose Davidson Writers Retreat, offering free residencies to fraud survivors who wanted to process their experiences through creative expression. Writing saved my sanity during this nightmare. I explained to the first group of retreat participants, 8 people who'd been victimized by various financial crimes across the country. Maybe it can help others find healing and purpose after betrayal. The retreat provided private cabins, communal workspace professional counseling support, and workshops led by established authors who specialized in trauma narratives. Participants spent 2 weeks processing their experiences while developing creative projects that transformed pain into art. Sarah Chen. I decided to keep using her original name for continuity, was a 73-year-old retired teacher from Oregon whose investment advisor had stolen her pension funds through fraudulent annuity schemes. She spent her residency writing children's stories about financial literacy and family trust. I want to teach kids how to recognize manipulation and protect themselves from people who prey on trust, she explained while reading her work to the group. If one child avoids financial fraud because of my stories, then my experience will have created something positive. David Martinez, a military veteran whose disability benefits had been stolen through fake investment programs, wrote poetry about betrayal and recovery that captured the unique pain of institutional abandonment that wounded warriors often experienced. The military teaches you to trust your unit with your life, he said during our evening discussion circle. But they don't teach you to recognize when civilians are stealing your future while pretending to help you invest it. The retreat attracted attention from major magazines and television networks interested in stories about fraud survivors creating art from trauma. My own writing career flourished as I documented both my family's experience and the broader patterns of financial abuse that destroyed families across America. My book proposal, titled The Wedding Heist: How Financial Predators Target Families Through Love and Trust, attracted multiple publishing offers and landed me representation with a prestigious literary agency in New York. The advance provided enough money to expand the retreat program and develop educational workshops for families vulnerable to financial manipulation. But the most meaningful changes were personal rather than professional. My parents began attending family therapy sessions focused on understanding how they'd been manipulated and developing better boundaries for future relationships. They learned to recognize red flags in financial advice and to value emotional wisdom over material success. We raised 2 daughters, Dad said during one particularly difficult therapy session. One who values creativity and family connection, and one who sees other people as resources to exploit. We need to understand what went wrong so we can support other families better. Mom struggled more with guilt and self-blame, questioning every parenting decision that might have contributed to Brielle's sociopathy. but gradually she developed perspective about the limits of parental influence over adult children's moral choices. "I gave both my daughters the same love and values," she concluded. "Brielle chose to reject everything we taught her about empathy and responsibility. That's her decision, not my failure." The relationship with Marcus evolved slowly and carefully, like two people learning to trust after betrayal. He visited the cottage several times during autumn, helping with retreat logistics and sharing meals with fraud survivors who appreciated hearing from the law enforcement perspective. "Agent Taylor helped save my family from bankruptcy," Sarah Chen told me privately. "But more importantly, he shows that some people in authority positions actually care about protecting vulnerable people rather than exploiting them." Marcus's work with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit continued, but he requested assignments that focused on victim assistance rather than undercover operations. The emotional toll of deceiving people, even criminals, had convinced him that his talents were better suited to investigation and prosecution support. "I want to build cases that help people rather than relationships that hurt people," he explained during one of our evening walks around the lake. "Working undercover with your sister taught me that I'm not good at lying even for professional reasons. It compromises something essential about who I want to be." Our conversations gradually shifted from processing trauma to exploring possibilities for the future, but both of us understood that rebuilding trust required patience, honesty, and acceptance that our relationship would be different than it had been before. "I'm not the same person you dated 3 years ago," I told him during one particularly honest discussion. "This experience changed my understanding of family, loyalty, justice, and what I want from life." "I'm not the same person either," he replied. "I've learned the difference between success and worth, between ambition and purpose. I want to build something meaningful rather than just advancing my career." By December, we were spending weekends together at the cottage working on retreat planning and discussing the possibility of a more permanent partnership. But both of us understood that our relationship needed to develop naturally, rather than being forced by external circumstances or past connections. The one shadow over this period of healing came from federal prosecutors' investigation into Brielle's planned murder scheme. Evidence recovered from her devices revealed detailed plans for Marcus's death during their supposed honeymoon, including research into undetectable poisons and staged accidents that would appear natural. "She wasn't just planning to disappear with stolen money," Agent Rodriguez explained during a victim impact meeting. "She was prepared to commit murder to protect her criminal enterprise and obtain additional insurance payouts. Your sister represents one of the most calculating sociopaths we've encountered in financial crimes investigation." Brielle accepted a plea bargain that sentenced her to 37 years in federal prison rather than risk death penalty prosecution for the murder conspiracy charges. She would be eligible for parole in 25 years, meaning she'd serve most of her productive adult life behind bars. My parents chose not to maintain contact with her during imprisonment, a decision that caused them enormous grief, but seemed necessary for their emotional recovery. "We'll always love the child we thought we raised," Mom said, "but we can't enable the criminal she chose to become. Sometimes loving someone means accepting that they're beyond your ability to help." 1 year after the wedding arrests, I sat in my cottage's renovated sunroom, putting finishing touches on the manuscript that would become my best-selling memoir about financial fraud, family betrayal, and the long journey back to trust. The book's success exceeded every expectation, landing on multiple bestseller lists and generating speaking opportunities across the country. But more importantly, the memoir became a resource for fraud survivors and a warning for families vulnerable to financial predators. Universities assigned it in criminal justice courses, victim advocacy groups distributed it to clients, and financial planners used it to educate customers about manipulation techniques. The Rose Davidson Writers Retreat had evolved into a year-round program serving over 100 fraud survivors annually. We expanded beyond individual healing to include family reconstruction workshops, legal advocacy training, and community education initiatives that helped people recognize and resist financial manipulation. "Your grandmother would be amazed," Mom said during the retreat's first anniversary celebration. "She always believed the cottage would inspire important writing. She just never imagined it would help heal people from the kind of betrayal that nearly destroyed our family." The celebration brought together 50 former retreat participants, federal agents who'd worked the case, victim advocates, and family members who'd found new purpose in fraud prevention work. Sarah Chen had published her children's financial literacy series with a major educational publisher. David Martinez received a poetry fellowship that allowed him to develop workshops for veteran fraud survivors. Most meaningfully, Uncle William had become a volunteer speaker who educated military communities about financial fraud targeting veterans. His presentations combined personal experience with practical advice that helped active duty personnel avoid the predators who specifically targeted military benefits. The same loyalty and trust that makes military units effective also makes veterans vulnerable to financial predators, he explained during his speech at our celebration. Education and awareness are our best weapons against people who exploit patriotism for profit. Great Aunt Helen, now 85 and still sharp as ever, had donated a significant portion of her recovered assets to establish an endowment fund that would support the retreat program permanently. Her gift ensured that fraud survivors would have access to healing resources for generations to come. "Money should create opportunities for good people to overcome bad experiences," she said during the endowment ceremony. "That's the best possible use for assets that criminals tried to steal for selfish purposes." The relationship with Marcus had developed into something deeper and more sustainable than our original connection. We'd learned to build partnership based on shared values and life experience rather than romantic fantasy or physical attraction. Both of us had been tested by extreme circumstances and emerged with clearer understanding of what we wanted from life and relationships. "I love the person you became after surviving this trauma," he told me during a quiet evening by the lake. "You transformed the worst experience of your life into healing opportunities for other people. That kind of resilience and compassion represents everything I want in a partner." We were planning a simple wedding for the following spring, a small ceremony at the cottage, with family and close friends, focused on commitment and community, rather than expensive celebration. The contrast with Brielle's fraudulent wedding would be deliberate, emphasizing authentic relationship over material display. My parents had rebuilt their marriage on foundations of honesty and mutual support rather than traditional gender roles and social expectations. Dad retired early to volunteer with senior fraud prevention programs, while Mom developed expertise in family financial planning that helped other couples protect themselves from manipulation. We learned that loving your children doesn't mean enabling their destructive choices, Dad said during one of our family dinners. Real love sometimes requires setting boundaries and accepting painful realities about people you want to protect. The cottage itself had been restored to its original beauty while being upgraded with modern technology that supported the retreat program. Writers worked in comfortable private spaces while sharing meals and evening discussions in communal areas that fostered healing community. But the most important restoration was psychological rather than physical. I'd reclaimed my creative sanctuary while transforming it into something larger than personal space, a place where broken trust could be rebuilt and where betrayal could be transformed into purpose. Standing on the dock where I'd first learned to swim with Grandma Rose, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from victim to advocate, from isolation to community, from heartbreak to hope. The cottage represented continuity with family history while embodying possibility for future healing. Brielle remained in federal prison, having shown no remorse for her crimes or interest in reconciliation with family members she'd systematically betrayed. She'd become a case study for criminal psychology programs and a cautionary tale for families dealing with financial pressure and social expectations. Sterling and Whitman received similar sentences after their conspiracy convictions, and their criminal organization had been completely dismantled through aggressive federal prosecution. The message to financial predators was clear: Targeting families through emotional manipulation would result in severe consequences rather than easy profits. But the real victory wasn't the criminal's punishment. It was the transformation of pain into purpose, betrayal into community loss, into healing. The cottage had become exactly what Grandma Rose envisioned when she promised it would inspire important writing that helped other people. Every ending creates space for new beginnings. I wrote in the memoir's final chapter. The question isn't whether we'll face betrayal and loss in life, it's whether we'll use those experiences to build something meaningful that helps other people survive similar challenges. The cottage hosted its second annual Fraud Survivor Conference that weekend, bringing together families from across the country who'd transformed their victimization into advocacy work. Law enforcement officers, therapists, writers, and community organizers shared strategies for prevention, recovery, and justice. "We can't prevent all financial crimes," Agent Rodriguez told the conference participants, "but we can build communities that support survivors and help families recognize manipulation before it destroys their security." As I listened to stories of resilience and recovery, I realized that my family's tragedy had become part of a larger story about human resilience and the power of community support to overcome individual trauma. The cottage evening concluded with a tradition we'd established during the first retreat. Participants shared brief reflections about hope, healing, and purpose discovered through their recovery journeys. Their words created a chorus of survival and determination that echoed across the lake water. "I lost my retirement savings to criminals, but I found my voice as an advocate for elderly financial protection. My daughter stole my inheritance, but I discovered family among fraud survivors who understand betrayal and recovery. Financial predators destroyed my trust in institutions, but I learned to trust community relationships built on shared experience and mutual support." As stars appeared over the lake where I'd spent childhood summers learning to fish and swim and dream, I felt grateful for the journey that had brought me home to purpose and community. The cottage would always be Grandma Rose's gift to my creativity, but now it was also my gift to other people who needed healing space and supportive community. Trust could be rebuilt, families could recover from betrayal, and sometimes the worst experiences of life became foundations for the most meaningful work of helping other people survive similar challenges with dignity and hope. Have you or someone you know ever experienced financial betrayal from family members or trusted advisors? What signs do you think families should watch for to protect themselves from these kinds of manipulation schemes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights might help other families recognize warning signs before they become victims. Thank you for following this difficult but ultimately hopeful journey from betrayal to healing. Please like this story if it moved you, subscribe for more content about resilience and recovery, and share this message with anyone who might benefit from understanding how financial predators operate and how communities can support fraud survivors. Remember that healing is possible, justice can prevail, and sometimes our worst experiences become the foundation for our most important work in the world.